Why are accessories for your Glock 19 important, and do they actually help? We're gonna show you guys the importance of each attachment by comparing this built Glock 45 to this stock Glock 19. In order of importance, I think the first attachment is gonna be this optic. We're running the Holosun 508T on this Glock 45, and then obviously just iron sights on this Glock 19. When comparing these two builds, it was very obvious. Looking at the accuracy of this 45 compared to the 19, which has the exact same barrel length, we actually had a faster drill with more accuracy. And going into this build drill, all I cared about was accuracy. This optic made it a lot easier. I did not have to try that much harder with this gun to get a much greater accuracy level. And that's just kind of common sense. When you're shooting and you present the gun, all you see is a dot with an optic and you just pull the trigger. With iron sights, you have to present and you have to line up your sights, which if you have a lot of muscle memory, you shoot a lot of guns, you're gonna be really quick at it, but there's just more things your brain has to do when you're shooting. When you have a dot, all you have to do is see the red dot, place it on the target and pull the trigger. Whereas iron sights, there's a couple things you have to think about. So I think that if you're going to do a build, an optic is gonna inevitably be your number one thing you should do. It's gonna bring you the most benefit. If you're doing a build, you should do it to make yourself a better shooter. You should be adding things to make you faster and more accurate. And I think obviously this adds a lot of accuracy. When shooting both of these handguns, it was very noticeable which was which. Obviously, this gun is not only a little bit bigger, but it has a compensator on there, and it made a huge difference in recoil. I'm not just saying that because we manufacture compensators, but even my cameraman Connor said, like, it is a completely different gun, hands down. It's gonna present itself as a lower recoiling handgun. And when you have less recoil, inevitably you can shoot faster. The build drill we did was just evidence of that. This gun shot a whole second faster than the stock 19, and I was doing my best to be as unbiased as possible. I was aiming strictly for the head box, and not only did we have better accuracy with this, but we also had better speed. The holsters were the same. Basically everything was the exact same with this drill. I tried to be as unbiased as possible. This gun just reduces recoil. When the gun goes off and the recoil happens, the time it takes for your iron or your dot to get back on target is going to be adding or subtracting time. This gun just got back on target faster, and I could pull the trigger again faster. So our split times were greatly reduced, which inevitably reduced the entire time of the drill. I have no doubt that if I threw a compensator on this gun, the speeds would be very similar, if not identical. A compensator is going to increase speed, and a dot is going to increase accuracy, and that's why I mentioned these two first. These are just more important when you're doing a build. If you are building out a gun, I think there are two things you should take in mind: speed and accuracy. There's a lot of cool things you can do to builds that make them look cool. And if a build looks cool, ultimately you're probably gonna shoot it more. But when we're looking at this as a tool, it's important to take the two most important factors into consideration. At the end of the day, a compensator is going to allow you to shoot faster. If you're a newer shooter, you're gonna see less rate of return on that, whereas a more advanced shooter will notice it right off the bat. So if you're looking for a compensator, we actually have these on the site right now, herringtonarms.com. Moving on down, we have the Overwatch Precision trigger. I like this trigger shoe a lot. Do I think it added any performance gains? Not in this build. The trigger bar was still a little heavy from Overwatch Precision, so we're gonna be adding a lighter trigger bar. Then I think it has the potential of adding speed. So I'll be really interested to see how that new trigger bar performs. However, I like the feel of this trigger a little bit better than the stock trigger. The stock trigger is really good. It's pretty light. It's one of the better striker fired triggers on the market. It's just so consistent. However, I really enjoy flat face triggers, and Overwatch did it right. I think this is pretty much the perfect Glock trigger. Nice big flat face. The trigger safety is not too intrusive. The break is very crisp. The reset is very tactile. It feels like a Glock trigger with a better trigger shoe. If you're someone that prefers a flat face trigger, this is a very simple upgrade that can potentially bring faster split times with a lighter trigger bar and just a little more consistency. I've complained a lot about these stock triggers. I do not like this little dongus that is on there. I know it has its place if you want to be consistent and have that digging into your finger in the exact same spot each time. However, I don't like the rounded edge. If you're shooting with wet hands or in inclement weather, it's just not ideal. My finger likes to slide around a lot on that trigger shoe, so I really prefer this trigger. And like I said, it has the potential to add speed to shooting, which is very important. The next attachment that I want to talk about is a weapon light. We do not have that on this gun, and it's not necessarily going to add much for you with speed or accuracy, but when it's nighttime, it's going to add speed and accuracy. So during the day, it's kind of a worthless thing. It adds a little bit of weight on your gun, so it could potentially reduce some recoil. But at night, I think this is probably the most important thing you could add to your handgun. More so than even maybe an optic, because if you can't see your target, you can't accurately shoot your target. And if you can't see your target, how can you have any level of speed? shooting fastly into the dark is not going to be good for anybody. So I think during the day, this doesn't add much for you. But at nighttime, it's probably going to be the most critical attachment that you have on your handgun. And for the last attachment we have on this gun, I'll go into more detail about other ones later. It's a notable mention. I really like the Cogworks extended mag release. If you shot Glocks at all, you've probably encountered a failure to lock back, and really that's typically because you're riding the slide release, slide lock. This Cogworks kind of gets it up out of the way, so you're not gonna ride it when you're shooting. And by riding it, I mean just your thumb is resting on it and it's holding it down. And when you hold down the slide release, your slide will not lock back. In order to get a much faster reload, I think this is incredibly important. If you try to do a reload with a forward slide, you have to come back up and rack it. So it's just gonna add a bunch of time. So I think this is important because, again, you're adding speed. But also this lever is just much easier to catch with the Cogworks. It's got this big ledge on here that is inevitably going to help when you insert a mag and your thumb has to hit that lever. Just makes it that much easier. So this is a very cheap attachment that would give you a lot more speed during reloads, which brings me to my next attachment that is not actually on here. We're working on a mag well for both the 45 and the 19. I think this is incredibly important if you want to increase your reload time. Everybody's butched to reload. They've hit the front of the gun, they've hit the back of the gun. So this is, again, another attachment that increases speed. We would have one on here, but I don't want to show you guys the R&D one yet. So we'll have one of these coming out here pretty soon. But that's just another attachment that's going to increase speed if you get into a gunfight or you have to use your handgun. The more time you have, the better. But we don't always have a lot of time, so if you can reduce your time it takes to do a reload, reduce your split times, reduce your target transition times, not only is it gonna make you faster, but it's gonna make you much more capable of protecting yourself and other people. One thing I will mention is there are a lot of Gucci or kind of worthless attachments for pistols. It's not necessarily a bad thing that people put those on their gun, but one thing to keep in mind is if you're spending your money, you should be spending your money to make you a better shooter. So there's a lot of silly things out there, and there's a lot of things that look like they may give you benefit, but at the end of the day, it's probably not going to do too much for you. So I feel like these are kind of the top attachments that will actually make you potentially a faster and better shooter. And the reason I say potentially is because if you don't actually shoot your build, you're probably not going to get that much better with it. So I know we've heard this a million times, but when you expect to buy something and get better, you also have to shoot and get better. So keep that in mind. I will warn you guys, there are potential for reliability issues when you add any attachment to any handgun, not just Glock. Glock has been historically a reliable handgun. So when you add a bunch of stuff to it, you can add the potential of reliability issues. At Herrington Arms, we go a very long way of trying to do our absolute best to make the most reliable product out there. And I feel like that's how our brand has grown to where it is today, is we put that at the utmost importance. If you don't have a reliable handgun, what's the point of having the gun at all? A lot of people say adding all this weight to your gun is gonna make it unreliable. That's just simply not been the case. You can add these larger optics, you can add good branded compensators, you can add lights. 99.9% of the time, you're not gonna have any issues. So to kind of expel that myth, if you get a compensator from Herrington Arms or any other really good top tier compensator brand, you're not gonna have issues. All that weight on your slide doesn't mean you have to chop it up into Swiss cheese and make it all super light or add springs. This build right here has been super reliable and we haven't had to do anything to the gun to try to get it to be reliable. So with almost any modification you make to your handgun, you're gonna probably have to get a different holster. This is a stock Glock, and this is a holster for a stock Glock with a TLR1. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna fit great. You have the chance of accidentally discharging the firearm. The gun has too much play in the holster. So if you do this stuff to your gun, you're gonna need a different holster. You're gonna need to take into account both the light and the compensator. Most holsters nowadays have the optics cut, so keep that in mind. Even if you are somebody who has a stock Glock, you might as well get an optics cut holster in the case that you decide to get that down the road. But these two attachments right here will make you have to change your holster if you don't account for it when you already bought one. Obviously, you can't run this stock gun in this holster that is made for a weapon-lighted handgun. But what's really nice is T-Rex Arms makes all the fronts open. So if you get a Glock 19 holster, even a 17 or 34, they're all gonna fit this holster or let the compensator through without any issues. A couple years ago, a lot of holsters had the Kydex form to the front. You'd have to take a Dremel to it and modify it, but T-Rex really does a nice job about this. So if you're looking at holster options and you wanna just buy one, keep in mind adding the weapon light to your gun first and then having an open front for the compensator later. So at the end of the day, I was a much faster, more accurate shooter with this handgun over the stock Glock. What do you guys think? Are you gonna put these attachments on your stock Glock, or are you gonna keep running stock? Let me know in the comments down below. I'm really curious to see what you guys have to say. If you guys liked today's video, we actually did a video very similar talking about the first 4 upgrades you should put on your handgun. If you guys like this, we'd appreciate a like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.